When we left him, Benjamin Siegel was standing inside a hotel that had finally, belatedly, begun to make money, unaware that his fate was already being decided somewhere else entirely. That somewhere else was Havana. In December of 1946, while the Flamingo limped toward its grand reopening in the Nevada desert, the most powerful organized crime figures in the United States were gathering in a Cuban hotel ballroom under the cover of a glamorous holiday party to settle what they were going to do about him. The location was the Hotel Nacional de Cuba, a grand, white, colonnaded building overlooking the Havana waterfront, the kind of property built specifically to project exactly the sort of international glamour that Benjamin Siegel had spent the last decade trying to manufacture in the Nevada desert. The man who called the meeting was Lucky Luciano. Luciano's position by this point was unusual. He had spent more than a decade in American prison before being deported to Italy in February of 1946, as a condition tied to his wartime cooperation with American intelligence. From Italy, with the full authority of the National Crime Syndicate still nominally his, but with American law enforcement watching his every documented movement, Luciano had made his way to Cuba, a country close enough to the United States to remain useful, far enough outside its jurisdiction to let him operate without the immediate threat of arrest. He needed to be seen exercising authority again. He needed the American bosses to travel to him, on his terms, in a country he controlled the optics of. More than 20 mob figures answered the summons. Representatives from crime families stretching from New York to New Orleans, from Buffalo to Tampa. An extraordinary, coordinated gathering of organized crime's most senior leadership, conducted entirely outside the reach of the FBI, the IRS, or any American court. A gathering this size, involving men this dangerous, required a cover story sturdy enough to survive any scrutiny. The cover story was a party. Specifically, a lavish entertainment engagement featuring a young singer who, by December of 1946, was already one of the most famous voices in America, Frank Sinatra. Sinatra flew to Havana, accompanied by three brothers, Charlie, Rocco, and Joseph Fischetti, cousins of the imprisoned Al Capone, deeply embedded in organized crime themselves. Joseph Fischetti, in particular, served as something between a chaperone and a bodyguard for the trip, ensuring Sinatra arrived, performed, and departed without incident. We want to be careful here about what we are and are not claiming. There is no suggestion in the historical record that Sinatra himself had any knowledge of or involvement in the business being conducted in the rooms around his performance. He was, by every credible account, exactly what he appeared to be that week, an enormously talented young entertainer, hired to provide exactly the kind of glamorous distraction that made the rest of the gathering possible. The music was real. The audience enjoying it was real. What the music was covering for was a death sentence. Upon Luciano's arrival, the assembled bosses presented him with cash gifts, described, with a kind of dark theatrical politeness, as Christmas presents. The total exceeded $200,000. The presentation was made at a dinner hosted by three of the most senior figures in the room, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, and Joe Adonis, men whose names will recur throughout the rest of this episode, and whose individual positions on what to do about Benjamin Siegel were about to matter enormously. This detail is worth sitting with for a moment, because it tells you something important about the scale of money moving through organized crime at this exact moment in history. The same broad period when Siegel's own $6 million construction overrun was being treated as a crisis significant enough to warrant a death sentence. $200,000, handed over as a holiday gesture of respect, was a rounding error to these men. $1 million in suspected skimming from a single hotel project was not. The difference was never really about the size of the number. It was about whose hands the money passed through, and whether those hands could still be trusted. The conference had other business to settle as well, beyond Siegel. There were ongoing disputes within the organization concerning narcotics operations across several territories. Disagreements significant enough that Luciano apparently felt the need to address them in person, using the rare leverage of having gathered so many senior figures in one place at one time. There was also a more theatrical piece of business, a staged reconciliation between two rival figures, Albert Anastasia and Vito Genovese, orchestrated by Luciano specifically to project an image of unity to everyone else in the room. We mention this not because it bears directly on Siegel's story, but because it helps establish something important about the texture of this gathering. This was not an emergency meeting called specifically because of one man's reckless spending. It was a full, scheduled session of organized crime's senior leadership, conducting routine business across multiple territories and disputes. Benjamin Siegel's fate was simply one item on a much longer agenda. That is, in some ways, the most unsettling detail in this entire episode. He was not the center of the room. He was a line item. At some point during the gathering, Meyer Lansky raised the subject himself. According to multiple second-hand accounts, most prominently those later attributed to a fellow attendee named Doc Stature, whose recollections decades afterward remain one of the primary sources for what was actually said inside that room. Lansky introduced the topic using a specific, almost clinically restrained phrase, the Siegel situation. Not the problem with Ben, not what Siegel has done, a situation. Language that manages to convey both the seriousness of what needed discussing and perhaps an unconscious attempt by Lansky to create some emotional distance between himself and what was about to happen to the man he had called his number two, since they were both children on the streets of New York. What followed was an accounting. The construction overrun, the Zurich deposits, the accumulated compounding fear that Siegel, faced with total failure, might simply disappear with whatever remained of the syndicate's money. The room listened, and then the room made a decision. The delegates voted to execute Benjamin Siegel. We should be precise about what that sentence means in practice, because a vote of this kind in this world was never a single dramatic gesture. It was closer to a board authorizing an action item to be carried out through the organization's existing operational structure. The contract moved through a specific chain of authority. Oversight was assigned to Charles Trigger-Happy Fischetti, a senior Chicago outfit figure, the same Fischetti family whose cousins had escorted Frank Sinatra to Havana for the cover party happening one floor below this conversation. Actual authorization to act was given to Jack Dragna, the Los Angeles boss who had been forced into a humiliating subordinate position under Siegel since 1937 on Luciano's own orders, and who, by virtually every account of their relationship, had despised Siegel personally for nearly a decade. Dragna, in turn, reportedly passed the contract down to a mob hitman named John Frankie Carbo, a soldier in the Lucchese crime family. The machinery was in motion. And then, according to the accounts that have survived, Meyer Lansky stood up. This is the moment this episode is named for. Not the whispers that led to the death sentence, but the whisper that tried, for a little while, to undo it. Lansky had spent nearly 30 years building his entire life around a partnership with Benjamin Siegel. He had identified him as a boy of 12 and called him brave. He had built criminal enterprises beside him through Prohibition, through the violent restructuring of the Castellamarese War, through every major transition organized crime had undergone in their shared lifetime. He had personally vouched for the Flamingo project to the very men now sitting in this room, putting his own credibility on the line for his oldest friend's vision. He was not going to let that friendship end with a unanimous, unopposed vote. He spoke. He asked the room for mercy, or, more precisely, for time. We do not have a verbatim transcript of what Lansky actually said in that room. What survives is the substance, passed down through secondhand testimony and decades of retelling. Lansky argued that the Flamingo had not yet had a real chance to prove itself. The construction disaster, the catastrophic opening, the temporary closure, all of it had happened before the property had been given any genuine opportunity to operate as intended. Give it time, Lansky reportedly argued. Let the hotel open properly. Let the numbers speak before the bullets do. It was not a pardon. Lansky was not asking the room to forgive what Siegel had done, or to abandon the death sentence entirely. He was asking for a delay, a specific, measurable condition under which the sentence might still ultimately be carried out. But not yet. Not immediately. Not before the one thing that might actually save Siegel's life had been given a chance to materialize. The room considered it. The compromise that emerged from that room has a specific, almost unbearable shape to it once you understand the full timeline. Wait, the room decided, until the Flamingo's grand reopening. That reopening was scheduled for December 26, 1946. The Havana conference itself was scheduled to conclude on exactly the same day. This was not a coincidence anyone in the room seems to have remarked upon at the time, at least not in any account that survives. But it meant something specific and terrible for Benjamin Siegel, whether he understood it or not. The men deciding whether he would live were going to learn the outcome of the Flamingo's reopening at almost precisely the moment they themselves dispersed back to their own cities, carrying the verdict with them. The death sentence had not been reversed. It had been postponed, pending a single data point that Siegel himself was, at that very moment, scrambling desperately to control. We need to say this plainly because the previous episode already showed you exactly what happened next, and it is worth connecting the two moments directly. The Flamingo's grand reopening, the one event that might have changed the outcome of this entire conference, was a disaster. The unfinished rooms, the unexpected rain, the substandard service, the casino hemorrhaging money badly enough to force a temporary closure within weeks. Meyer Lansky had asked the room for time to let the numbers speak. The numbers spoke immediately, and they said exactly the wrong thing. The reprieve Lansky had won for his oldest friend evaporated almost the instant it was granted. Not through any further deliberation, not through any second vote, but simply through the brutal arithmetic of a hotel that could not stop losing money during the one window of time when its performance actually mattered more than at any other point in its existence. The Flamingo did eventually recover, as we told you in the previous episode. By the spring of 1947, it was generating real revenue. By most measures, it was becoming exactly the success Siegel had always insisted it would be. It made no difference. The conditional reprieve had been tied to a specific moment in time, the grand reopening itself, and that moment had already failed. Nobody reconvened the Havana conference to reconsider the verdict once the spring numbers improved. There was no mechanism for that kind of second chance in the world Siegel operated in. A sentence delayed is not a sentence reversed. Meyer Lansky had bought his oldest friend a few extra months of life. He had not bought him a future. We want to pause here and ask you to think about something that the existing historical record cannot answer for us. What did Benjamin Siegel actually know in the early months of 1947 about how close he had come to being killed in December? There is no clear evidence that anyone told him directly about the Havana vote, or about Lansky's intervention, or about the conditional nature of the reprieve he was unknowingly living inside. He may have known nothing at all, continuing to throw parties, court Hollywood friends, and manage his recovering hotel, with no idea that his life had already been formally voted on and conditionally spared by men he considered, in some cases, lifelong friends. Or he may have known everything and simply continued behaving exactly as he always had, because that too would have been entirely consistent with the man Meyer Lansky had described at age 12. Brave, impulsive, always ready to act first, even perhaps when the thing he should have been most afraid of was his own oldest friend's diminishing ability to protect him. We are going to leave the Havana conference here. The bosses have dispersed back to their own cities, carrying a verdict that has already, quietly, started to come true. Frank Sinatra has finished his performance and flown home, almost certainly with no idea what his music had been covering for. Lucky Luciano remains in Cuba, his authority reasserted, his position within the syndicate as secure as it has been since his deportation. And somewhere in Beverly Hills, in a rented mansion on North Linden Drive, a man who does not fully understand how close he has already come to death continues living exactly the life that put him there. He has a few months left. In part 5, the final part of this series, we arrive at the night itself. A rented mansion, a newspaper, a sofa in a quiet living room, and 9 shots fired through a window that ended Benjamin Siegel's life before he turned 42. We are also going to tell you something the official record has never resolved, and something that, remarkably, may still be unfolding right now, more than 75 years later, as new and unverified claims continue to surface about who was actually in that room.